standing, bend your head and let me touch the sky. Standing tall, she's still and silent. You can hear the daybreak if you try.
Stewart, a young man on his way up, a young man not afraid of taking a risk. What does a fellow think about when he quite literally puts his life on the line, when he takes over as lead man in a chancy and uncertain venture? What thoughts go through his mind as he searches for a way over the obstacles he and his fellow climbers find between themselves and their goal?
When you climb, you don't think about anything except really climbing and moving, and your next movements. You're not worried about any problems that you might have, the stock market or the prime interest rates, or somebody not paying their bills, or bills that you owe and you can't pay on time. You just they're just blank from your mind.
I'm going to stay here and rest for a while. I can't move. Up rope! Watch me now. My God, Al, that's strenuous.
Your only real worry is making it up and not hurting yourself. You can't be thinking about anything else. It's an almost total concentration.
Sharing risks is nothing new for these two, although they have less time for climbing now than they once had. On summer weekends, when they pit themselves against the grueling challenges of the peaks, Al works with Scott Stewart. But through the week, in a building where backpacks and other mountaineering soft goods are manufactured, Al works for Scott. How did a small offshoot of the sewing trades come to be established in the mountains, presided over by an owner in his 20s? To answer that is to indicate the continued strengths of the American private enterprise system, an institution which has been presenting its challenges and rewards to young men and women on their way up for more than 200 years, without ever guaranteeing that the climb would be easy or that reaching the top would be automatic.
Okay, I started my business in 1971, and it really grew out of climbing. I picked up an old sewing machine. In fact, it was a 100-year-old machine, to repair and make equipment for myself, particularly knapsacks. And pretty soon, friends of mine saw what I had, and they wanted some too. And a demand was set up. I had to meet the demand. So I picked up 5, 6 machines and the people to work with them. During that time, the first year and a half of my business, I was making primarily mountaineering equipment, rock climbing equipment, trying to see if indeed I could make a living doing that. But it proved that there was too much competition for me to get a sufficient share of the market. During that time, I thought about looking around for other things to make with sewing machines. And we have a family farm in Wisconsin, which I saw a need for a new product. The cattle have a fly problem, and the fly problem is controlled with a bag. Now, that bag hadn't been changed in 25 years. It was basically a burlap canvas bag. I used the ideas that I had in my mountaineering equipment, using mainly nylon and synthetics. The dust bags were the thing that really got me going as far as a dollar volume product.
Courage is a trait largely attributed to adventurers, to those who turn their backs on the everyday world of commerce. Yet it is Scott Stewart's courage in taking a new risk which is helping to lift his tiny segment of the American dream up out of obscurity. But as in his climb up the mountain, every inch gained has its price. In this case, there is the cost of retaining a patent attorney and establishing legal protection for the unique features of the dust bag he has invented.
And the insecticide, which is a powder very much like flour, is poured into the bag, and it's zippered shut. It's hung up.
What's the purpose of these?
Well, they weight the bag down to keep it from flapping around, and they also attract cattle. The cattle love to come up and play with these and hit them. They bump it and they kick the dust up inside of the bag and blow it around, and they blow it out the sides.
So it's kind of a pumping action,
Right.
And it's dispensed all around the
perimeter
opening.
of the bag. There's nothing else like it, not even close.
I would guess on something of this nature, it might run $600–700 to get an application on file in the U.S. Patent Office. And have you started to sell these devices yet?
We've got some big orders for the bag, so I think we should go ahead and try our best to get a patent on it.
Like other manufacturers, Scott Stewart must constantly try to come up with the something better that will attract new customers. A product that will meet a need or supply a demand more efficiently or less expensively than his competitors. But take note that a new and better product is developed at the sole risk of the person who provides it.
When I first got this contract for the dust bags, I went out and bought 20 new sewing machines. And the 20 sewing machines cost $12,000. And when you're taking a risk like that, you don't sleep well at night sometimes when the problems that seem to invariably come up. You just have to worry a lot, and you hope you can pull the thing off.
Scott is learning firsthand about the role of the capitalist to make the investments in plant and machinery which enable others to turn out goods, and to do it in the face of ever-changing costs.
If you beat Fish's price, we'll see what we can do. I don't use much money to live on. I don't have a house or airplane or a boat or anything like that. It's just, just myself. I don't have a lot of expensive habits, so I can live very cheaply and put most of the money back into the business.
Scott's statement that he puts more into his firm than he takes out is contrary to a lot of notions about profit. In reality, most businesses return far less on the dollar than the public supposes. After-tax profits, what's left when all the bills are paid, are usually about 4%, 4 cents per dollar of sales.
Because when you commit yourself to a large order, of course, you have to hold the price that you tell the person you're going to make it for. And when you do that, you have to be very, very careful that you include all the costs to you in the bag, such as labor, overhead, freight, just everything, Social Security tax. And that probably is the most crucial part of trying to figure out whether you're going to make money or lose money. It's as simple as that.
Which do we have the more important orders for right now?
Well, we got to get...
Selling and pricing are not the only problems a business has. There are people problems to cope with, too. The kind of problems Scott hears about from Laurie, his plant manager.
Do you think that people will object to being switched over to sewing something different? You know that affects their piecework rates.
Well, there's not much we can do about it.
I mean, I can foresee some sort of problem there, but it depends on the explanation that would give them as to why they're being switched over.
Well, we have to tell them it's very urgent. The only thing that we could do is, what would be fair to do is figure out their average hourly wage when they were making dust bags and pay them that until they're equal to that or above that on packs.
That sounds like a really good idea.
So a man makes a decision and hopes that his solution will not only help his business and help him make a better product, but will keep his employees happy as well. A large order. One problem solved, maybe, just in time for another one to develop. A subcontractor who has been silk screening the dust bag abruptly announces that he is quitting the business. Scott cannot find another printer to take over except at triple the price. More problems, more worry, more searching for solutions.
Okay. Climbing. To me, it was always a great relief to know that I can go out climbing, and it's almost like taking time out, stepping back out of the picture, and then looking back, maybe with a little bit more light or insight into the troubles that have been bothering you. I think that's basically the reason why I climb.
A timeout it well may be, but Scott's climb serves also as a symbol for another element in business: productivity. Owner and employee, management and labor. Scott and Al have set out to scale the heights together, an indication of the respect and trust that exists between them. They are linked now by a common bond, an economic lifeline, and neither of them can survive unless the other attends unrelentingly to the responsibilities related to his end of the line.
Bit slippery spots.
Okay, got me, Al? This is going to be kind of an interesting move. Clip through.
Productivity measures how effectively manpower, capital, and technology are used. For his part, Scott, management, must make the investments and provide the technology that will help his employees increase their output. On his part, Al, labor, must work with vigor and care, increasing his efficiency, making more out of less. Otherwise, the enterprise is stalled, just as Scott and Al are stalled when impossible weather blows between them and their goal, the mountaintop. Is the business, too, to be stalled by the lack of a silkscreen supplier?
You have two choices, either to lose money on the bags or do the silk screening myself. And it turns out I bought the man's equipment and built a conveyor dryer. We now have all the silk screening equipment. Not only can we make the bags cheaper than he quoted them, but we also have total control over it.
So work goes on, in spite of the unexpected expense involved in buying the silkscreen printer and developing the conveyor. The employees at Scott Designs still have their jobs because Scott has looked ahead, preparing his company to meet such emergencies.
So you learn about the delicate world of economics, that you have to price your product well enough to cover 100 costs you didn't even think you had.
One of the biggest costs confronting Scott or any business is the cost of hiring the employees with whom and by whom the aims of the enterprise are achieved. Anyone watching Scott and Al in their climb must conclude that Al's skills are every bit as necessary as those of the man at the top, that Al's talents are fully as vital to the joint effort as Scott's. In accepting his share of the responsibility for the success of the enterprise, both here and at the workshop, Al not only finds greater satisfaction in his own efforts, but also frees Scott for other things.
When I first started out, of course, I did everything. I sat down at the sewing machine and I wrote the checks, I collected the bills, fixed the machines, cut the material. My time is used for research and development. Now it's not used in managing the people, which it used to be.
Scott's concern with research and development is evidence of his realization that he can't afford to be content with today's success. He must always be looking ahead, always be making provision for whatever new products he will offer tomorrow.
There's another method, instead of using a powder, about putting a liquid insecticide upon cattle. And they're called oilers because they use a fuel oil base to put the insecticide in. If I can come up with a new cattle oiler, something that's totally different, I might have something. But every time you start something new, any new product, of course, it's going to be a risk. You don't even know if the thing's going to work. It might not. If it does, and if you calculated the cost correctly, and if you sold it, then it's paid off. But that one also is going to have to cover the 10 others that didn't.
But will it work? As a matter of fact, the first model of the oiler is a failure.
What was the problem with this one, Sky?
It worked fine for the first hour or so, and then the fuel oil inside dissolved the plastic, and it just broke apart. And without our testing that we've done on it, we would have lost an incredible amount of money. Yeah, we solved that finally after looking about a month, and found a new type of plastic which is resistant to the solvent, which we'll be using. just created some other problems, such as fabricating. We can't use glue, we have to heat weld it.
Problems. Problems. Before the difficulties with the new product can be completely ironed out, a much greater dilemma presents itself. The most far-reaching decision Scott has ever had to face. The workshop has overgrown its quarters. It must expand, and there is no room for the additional machines and the new people Scott needs to complete the agricultural orders coming in. The labor pool in this small mountain community is limited. When an employee leaves, it is difficult to find a replacement. What's more, Scott's present location, ideal when his business was primarily mountaineering equipment, is not good for a supplier to the dairy and beef industries. Transportation rates and communication problems almost demand relocation. To buy or to build, or should he rent? Scott finds himself frequently on the phone, conferring with landlords or architects, or traveling to communities where possible relocation sites are available.
$75 was a travel expense.
Okay.
And here's the
Finally,
deposit.
after months of searching, Scott decides on a place hundreds of miles away from the mountains, hundreds of miles distant from the peaks he loves to climb. In Wisconsin, not far from his boyhood home, he finds a building with triple the floor space of his mountain workshop. The new plant is nearer his markets and will reduce his shipping costs. It is large enough to accommodate the 60 or more employees he expects to hire. But he can't help wondering if it may not be too big.
If I don't double in size, I'll be paying more for rent and a bigger building than I need, which will be coming out of my pocket. I'll be losing money from my own salary and paying it to rent. I'm gambling on my future. But I have a feeling that I'm going to need all that space, and I'm going to need it rather quickly. Unfortunately, I hate to go in many ways because you've been the nicest people I've ever had who worked for me. And we've gotten a lot done up here and have had a lot of fun. But I've got another guy to come in, and his operation is very much like mine. He'd employ probably most of you. He's got a sewing operation where he makes little knapsacks and things like that of his own design. So essentially your jobs will still remain here and be the same as they were for me. I want to thank you very much for doing what you've done for me. It's worked out well for me, and I hope it's worked out well for you.
With good friends to part from, with the cost and chaos of moving, with anxiety over the effect that days in transit, days of total downtime will have on his production schedules, and with misgivings about the problems he faces in training a new workforce in Wisconsin, Scott Stewart feels the nagging of an uncertain future tugging at him. So how does he cope with the stress? He heads in the direction of the most precipitous, the most dangerous rock face around. He heads for the mountain. Scott Stewart, a young man on his way up, a young man who lives with risk. He knows he will encounter difficulties and that there is no guarantee that he will make it to the top. But in a way, he welcomes the perils ahead. For struggle tempers men and institutions, and he is willing to take the gamble in hope of the rewards, whether the profits are measured in terms of increased self-respect or in dollars and cents, or both. At age 23, Scott Stewart has parlayed a 100-year-old sewing machine into a business with annual sales of $1.5 million. A business that will be providing jobs for 60 people in the months ahead. And he has done all this in the span of 3 years. Scott's success has been an uphill climb, and more steep going lies ahead, just as it does for other businesses, large and small, which make up the institution of private enterprise. But what has happened to Scott is proof of the dynamic vitality of the system. Proof that the climb is worth the effort for the climber who is willing to set his sights high, who is willing to take the risks up there, where a cool head and courage are the tools of the trade. For with a man and with a business, the challenge never ends. There is always another mountain to climb.
It's all a mountain. Take me higher. Are you kind, kinder than you seem? And nature smile, or is this smile a dream?